Okay, so my name's Amber MacLean-Hawes. I work for the Confederacy in Mainland, and I'm the emergency management officer. I just started that role here last summer in June, and basically the role in the project comes from, trying to think, we work with 6 different First Nations communities. So the project is looking at each community and identifying the strengths, weaknesses, and gaps within those communities and how it relates to emergency preparedness. It also takes that part of that holistic approach and looks at what are the health impacts of emergencies and how our emergency is going to be impacted by climate change. So that's a general overview of what I do. So some of the things I had to go through to get in this role, emergency management was something quite new to me. I have a health promotion background and a chemistry background. I got into the position with the help of my health promotion background, but I also worked at the organization as a summer student, which helped build that relationship with that organization. I took numerous courses online, training courses, just trying to get my head wrapped around on what emergency management is and how it works in quote unquote like the general population, but also looking at how we use that for First Nations, because there is a lot of differences based on community needs, and that applying it to one municipality versus a First Nations community has some differences in what the population needs and requires, and also the resources available in comparison. So since I did a community survey, because I wanted to get, you're trying to reach out to the majority of the community members. A lot of times we talk with people in the emergency management role or that are controlling that file for the community, but we kind of forget the actual community that deals with it on a regular occurrence. So I really wanted to reach out to those community members and see what their inputs are and how we can use their input to fill in those gaps. And also realizing that they know their strengths in their community because they're witness to it every day, and they also know where the weaknesses lie. So we did a survey. It was quite a long survey first looking at it, but it really only took about 10 to 20 minutes. And the survey basically just goes through the steps of like emergency preparedness. It looks at the past events, how community members have been impacted by them. It also looks at what the communities have faced for climate change currently and where they see that projection going in the future. As well as then we wanted to look at like the holistic approach to health and the health impacts. So then it starts breaking down community members' health concerns, either them themselves or family members or neighbors. And also looking at, we know we deal with a lot with the physical, but we sometimes tend to forget the mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And since we are in a First Nations community, using that whole holistic approach in the medicine wheel really hits on some of those issues that sometimes get forgotten. And then another general thing with the survey was just to see, is the communities aware of some of the efforts that are taking place? Have there been plans in the community? Do they know who to contact if something were to happen? Also, do they themselves feel prepared when it comes down to it? The community can feel prepared, but if we don't know some individuals or certain neighbors and families, then we're not actually getting out to the whole community. And working at CMM, the Confederacy Mainland, they really focus heavily on like building that family. And so when you work there, they want you to make you feel like you are part of their family, as that stems from their communities and how they feel in their communities. So it does pose a challenge because you see some communities are losing that connectedness, but try to use this holistic approach and get people back to those basics of knowing that they are all family in the end. And it's proven that they say when an emergency happens, even though they have their issues, they leave those aside during the time and they rally together and get through it, which shows the resilience and just that, that core value. Yeah, so right now we're in that climate change world. Everybody knows that climate change, or I can't say everyone, but there is an awareness that climate change is happening. Using the health, my health promotion background, really you can tie health into any aspect of life because that's usually the core and the center. So we know emergencies, a lot of the communities are facing like flooding and storms, even say water boil advisories. And we know that climate change is increasing the impacts of raising the water levels. We're having infrequent storms. Stronger storms are coming at unusual times compared to the normal pattern. So we see climate change taking an impact on that. And we also see climate change creating emergencies which then are impacting health. So we say, just use the example of like a physical injury. We have an ice storm, an elder falls right there, that has impacted her health or their health. If we look at it further, you look at the distress that people face during emergencies. Examples are like isolation or displacement. So that really starts to affect their emotional health and their mental health, which then you can see if you're stressed or anxious, it starts impacting your physical health in tune because maybe they're not eating their normal way or they're not taking care of themselves because they're so focused on that emergency or the event. And then it turns into always worrying about what's to come and how they're going to get through. So then it also takes a part of their forgetting or not going back to their spiritual health to help them get through it. So you can see there's just kind of that whole, everything's connected and you can make different ties to like health or climate just depending on the situation. There's no one set way in which it's going to affect it, but we are seeing that different situations are affecting health in different ways. I'm actually African Nova Scotian, so it's funny, I come into this role and people are kind of assuming that I'm First Nations just because I have that lovely complexion that I kind of fit in anywheres. But it doesn't really matter about that. You really have to go into an organization being open, but also understand that people are going to be apprehensive because you're not known to their community. So as I tell people, it takes some time to build trust. It's probably taken me at least, like even now I'm finally starting to feel that trust with the people I'm working with in the communities. And I've been there for almost a year. And now I finally feel more confident in just taking that time. And sometimes it's just, you go to a meeting and you just, instead of being so focused on work and what you're trying to get out of the meeting, it's actually just taking time to know that person and their needs and just how they interact with other people, because it might be very different from how you interact. So that's probably my biggest thing. Also going, like, we have that whole idea of a cultural competency and trying to understand how different cultures work and the way they accept you in and the respect you need to give. Whether you work with a community or you work for a community, and that whole idea, if what you're going when you enter a community, if it's for your purposes or actually for the overall like health and wellness of their community. And there's always that idea of, are we going in and actually letting the community letting the community take control and leading it through their path versus us just imposing certain ideas and sets and what we want to see as results. So just kind of that idea. But as the organization of the Confederacy, Mainland, Mi'kmaq, these projects are what the community members are telling us that they would like to see done and like where their needs are coming from. In the project, we do try to look at the traditional knowledge piece and practices. There is a challenge with that due to our communities and some of their historical impacts. There is a lack of traditional knowledge, not in all communities and not in all community members, but you can see that across the board that folks are, when you ask them about traditional knowledge and you go in expecting that they're going to just tell you right off, like, these are all the things you do. And that's kind of maybe my ignorance, I guess, in thinking that people would all have their own traditional knowledge practices and then realizing that it is forgotten for some people and they didn't get the chance to learn some of those practices. So then trying to work through it with them and talk about maybe some ideas and maybe some things that their parents have done or grandparents, and then trying to get them thinking that how we can incorporate, even if they don't know them, what would be some things they'd like to see be brought back into the communities. I know an elder mentioned that they do not know how to dry foods, but that was something very commonly done in their family. And also made it aware, like, if we're trying to prepare ourselves for 72 hours, that is a food source that we could have. Mm-hmm. So for youth, there's lots of opportunities. I feel when you're going through school, even myself, you don't really know of all the opportunities that do exist. Sometimes they're not right in front of you, and you have to go through different pathways to find them. So just the youth knowing that there is opportunities and there is people there to support them, and just trying to get access to those people who are more invested in supporting the youth through their journey. And I think the hardest thing, I don't know if it's the hardest thing about youth, engagement level is always a challenge. And since I've already went through schooling and I know that the scientific background is stuff I spent time in, is how do you relate that to youth who actually haven't had that chance at that? And maybe don't even know that that chance exists for them. So it's trying to find different ways to connect with the youth and show them that exists. And not so much me empowering youth, but finding ways for the youth to feel empowered within themselves to continue forward. Oh, this week was, it was really, I want to say fantastic. There was like some tired moments, but that comes with anything. I think I mentioned this earlier too, just seeing that we're all coming from different provinces and different communities and to face different things in our lives, and that we can all come together and connect for like more of a main purpose, and just showing the support for one another. So I didn't realize that people were gonna come up to you and be like, you know what, hey, this is what we're doing in our community, let's talk and see if we can make it work for yours, or I like what you're doing in yours, can we influence that here, and what are your resources, or how did you gain access to that? And just looking at different problems and then different solutions and that we can work together. It's a lot of knowledge as a whole, and I think it's very similar to people feeling prepared. Some people don't feel prepared because they're so focused on that negative, and we overlook the positive aspects of that whole resiliency piece. And it's very similar here. People don't realize how much knowledge they actually have until you get in a comfortable and open, safe space where you can start sharing it and really thinking.